Folksy Tales, and on this channel I talk about stories, in particular folk tales, beliefs, and mythologies. If you are interested in Tolkien lore, feel free to check out my channel, The Folksy Friend. Today we are talking about a legend, a Celtic legend in fact. This is the tale of the 12 horned women. One night, it just so happened that a rich woman was up rather late. She was sitting by her fire, carding and preparing wool. Her family and all the house servants were already asleep. While she sat and did her work, suddenly a knock came at the door, and she got up to answer. But before she opened the door, she called, "Who's there?" To which an unusual voice responded, "I am the Witch of the Horn." And the woman, thinking that maybe one of her neighbors was in distress or confused, opened the door. The rich woman opened the door to find a woman standing there holding a wool carder, and this woman had a single horn growing out of her forehead. Without so much as a word to the house owner, the woman walked straight inside, sat down by the fire, and began to violently card the wool. After a moment, she looked at the homeowner and asked, "Where are the other women?" And of course, the rich lady had no answer for her. But not a moment later, there was another knock at the door, and the woman turned back to the door and called, "Who's there?" To which another voice responded, "I am the Witch of Two Horns." And the woman again opened the door. This time there was a woman standing there with two horns out of her forehead, holding a spinning wheel. This two-horned woman barged in like the first, sat down by the fire, and began to spin as fast as lightning. Now these knocks just kept coming until eventually 12 women were sitting in the rich lady's home by the fireplace, all very quickly and efficiently preparing the wool into yarn. They had horns on their heads ranging from just the 1 to 12 all around her skull. They sat together, carding and spinning, singing and chanting ancient rhymes to one another. But they didn't say anything to the lady of the house, and she found that she was absolutely frozen in terror. She wanted to flee or to perhaps go upstairs and check on her children, but no matter what she did, she couldn't move. All she could do was stand and watch the women. Until suddenly, without any preamble, one of the witches turned around and demanded that the noble lady make them a cake. And so, the rich woman, finding that she was able to move suddenly, stood up and went to do as they asked. She prepared the flour, but when she went to find something to carry water in from the well, she couldn't find anything. And the witches demanded that she use a sieve to go bring in the water from the well. Finding that she had to obey, she picked up a sieve and went outside. But of course, when she got to the well, she couldn't carry water in the sieve. And so, hopeless, terrified, she sat down and began to weep. As she sat by her home's well, a voice came to her and told her to use yellow clay and moss to plaster up the sieve and carry water. And she did what this voice said. Then the voice came again, and it told her, to get rid of the witches, you must go back to your home, stand in the north angle, and 3 times yell out loud, "The mountain of the Fenian women and the sky above it are all on fire." And trusting the voice coming from her well, the woman did as it said. At hearing those words, the witches suddenly stood in a great fright and sprinted out of her home, fleeing back to where they lived. And as soon as they were gone, the spirit of the well spoke again and told the woman what she must do to protect her home from the witches, for they would undoubtedly return. First, she took water that she washed her children's feet in and sprinkled it outside the door on the threshold. Then she took the cake that the witches had made while she was outside, using the blood of her family as the liquid to bind it together. And she broke it into pieces and then put a small piece in each of her children's mouths as they slept. Then she took the cloth that the witches had been working on and she placed it inside a chest, so half was in the chest and half was outside, and she locked it tight. Finally, she secured her front door by taking a large crossbeam and securing it to the jambs, which I'm not sure how she did that on her own, but I believe in this lady. She's got to protect her family. Now she waited up, but it didn't take all that long for the witches to return. They came back raging and screeching furiously, First they cried, "Open, open, open, feet water." But the feet water replied, "I cannot. I am sprinkled all over the threshold, and my path is to the lough." Then they cried, "Open, open, open, wood and trees and beam." But the door replied, "I cannot. The beam is fixed to the jambs, and I have no power to move." They tried again, yelling, "Open, open, open, cake we made and mingled with blood." But the cake replied, "I cannot, for I am broken and bruised, and my blood lies on the lips of the sleeping children." With all of their tricks used and their magic useless, the witches screamed and raged, but had no choice but to leave and return home. And they cursed the spirit of the well as they flew away. One witch, in her haste and anger, dropped her mantle, which the woman took, and hung above the mantle. It remained in her family for 500 years as a reminder of that terrifying, terrible night. And that is the story of the 12 horned women. I'm going to leave this one as a relatively short one. I could probably go on for hours about witches, but I think that may be its own video at some point. When I was looking up information about this legend, I found an interesting connection to fairy lore, particularly around the Isle of Man. There have been beliefs recorded that if one was to not leave water out for the fairies at night, the fairies would come into your home and drink your blood, or take your blood while you were sleeping and make a cake with it. And then any of the cake that they didn't eat, they would leave around the house. And if it was not found and fed to the sleepers would die of a wasting illness. And that is 100% on par with what I just read in this legend. The idea of having to feed the cake to the sleeping family to awaken them from the witch's curse that was keeping them asleep. Although it isn't explicitly said that their people are cursed, I think it's kind of implied, because who's going to let you take blood and not wake up? The whole family probably would have reacted to that. I have to say, initially, when the witches were just in the woman's house kind of doing her work for her, I was thinking, like, are these helpful witches? Up until the point where we found out that they had taken blood from the family. Then I was like, oh, okay, something sinister is probably going on here. But still, interesting legend. Thank you for spending some time with me here today. I will see you on Wednesday when I have the Chinese legend, the Crane Maiden. And I will see you then.